Yes, thank you, Kerry. Good evening, everyone. Thank you very much for joining us tonight. I think it's fair to say when I joined the British Army as a young subaltern, gosh, 30 odd years ago, I thought the Cold War was coming to an end and we'd never see the kind of scenes or face the circumstances that we are facing now. But sadly, events have proved just how wrong that hope would have been. I'm sure we have all been horrified by the heartbreaking events that have unfolded in Ukraine over the last few months. Um, the initial feeling of helplessness that we all felt was clearly rapidly overtaken by a desire to do everything we could to help. That can feel quite challenging at times to be faced with an event like that and thinking, gosh, how on earth can we help? How can we step up? Wiltshire has always been really good in leading the way in those circumstances. And I don't think it's any surprise that as a county we've stepped up again to support Ukraine and its people. Our country has a long history, a very long history of supporting people fleeing war and war-torn countries. And once again, it's great that people are offering to do everything they can. So this evening we wanted to talk through with you the support we've been providing for Ukrainian people coming to Wiltshire, the important role that you've got to play. The situation's been incredibly fast moving. Government has brought forward a number of different schemes and programs, and those have evolved rapidly over time. And so we hope tonight will be useful to clarify a lot of the information available and make sure that we give a good, clear view of the current picture. I am very proud to say Wiltshire has been one of the most generous areas in the UK, with many people offering their homes to Ukrainians fleeing the conflict in their own country, just as we also have been with the Syrian refugee programme and the Afghan refugee programme. The latest figures show that we've got 2,830 households registered with the Homes for Ukraine scheme in Wiltshire. Currently, 416 of those households are matched, with a total of 1,150 individuals from Ukraine, and 787 visas have been issued so far. Our teams are working really hard to provide support and carry out the checks needed for those arriving in Wiltshire. We know our communities are joining together. Hubs have been created all over the county to support and provide networking, assistance, all the help that's needed. Added to that, the immense generosity of people donating money and resources, and as I've said, we know Wiltshire is always steps up to play its part in providing a welcoming place for those fleeing war and needing help. So I'm now going to pass over to Claire Edgar, who is our director for Whole Life Pathway, but also, more importantly in this case, leads the team which has been coordinating our support here in Wiltshire. Claire and her team have done an amazing job dealing with a situation that is fluid, where often we are finding, or we found guidance has been changing 2-3 times a day. It has taken a little while for government to sort of work out what the schemes will look like, but now they're in place, and now that they are crystallizing and the guidance is changing a little less frequently, we're at a point where we can be moving over to making sure that you understand what it is that we can do, that you can do, and how we can all work together to help. So thank you, and over to Claire.
Thanks, Richard. And welcome everybody. Lovely to see you all online. First of all, I just wanted to take this opportunity to thank everybody on behalf of the council who have provided the level of support that you have in local communities for people arriving from Ukraine. Wiltshire really is quite an amazing county in regards to this, as Richard's already highlighted. We are one of the highest number of local authorities in terms of people who have registered support, and indeed numbers of individuals who are already sponsors, which I'll come on to in just a second. So yeah, if we could just move on to the next slide. What I'm going to initially talk to you about is the two government schemes that you may have already have heard of in the media. And the reason it's important to understand what these two schemes is that they are different. And really what we wanted to do today was to sort of help you understand some of the subtle differences between the schemes, and indeed the role of the local authority in both of these schemes. schemes. So first of all, the Homes for Ukraine scheme is the scheme that the local authority has a level of responsibility for, and it is indeed for individuals where you may have already registered your interest in becoming a sponsor, and you may have found a guest from Ukraine, and that could be an individual or indeed a family. And then what you're doing is looking to match. And then what we do is we come online with you and offer you a level of support. That support includes, as you'll probably be aware for those of you who have already gone through this process, some level of checks. So what we do is we do DBS checks. So that's checks around safeguarding and work with the police national computer information. We do accommodation checks, and that's to ensure that the property that you have offered meets the standard requirements that have been set by government. And we also go on and undertake a welfare check. So we have a small team currently that's growing quite fastly of caseworkers that undertake this activity. And indeed, we have a refugee resettlement and migration team that will respond to any queries that you may have. You'll be also aware, for those of you that are linked into the scheme, that your guest will receive £200 as a one-off payment, and that is all of the individuals that have come from Ukraine. So if you have a family of 4, they should all receive a one-off payment of £200. And you, as the sponsor, will receive £350 per month during the stay of the guest. So, for example, if your guests remain with you for 6 months, you would receive that £350 per month during that time. We are really heavily reliant on you for information, and indeed, it's important that you tell us when people arrive, because we don't always receive that information from central government in a timely way. All the checks that we undertake through the Homes for Ukraine scheme are really important, and we want to try and achieve them before your guest arrives. But we also recognise the need to support people to leave Ukraine as quickly as possible, and so has the government. Therefore, what they have done is put in additional checks at the border, so to speak, to ensure that visas can be issued in a timely way. Therefore, if your guest has arrived, it won't matter if these checks haven't taken place. So please be assured we will undertake them, but it doesn't slow the visa application down. We also receive £10,000 per individual as a local authority, and the idea behind that money is really to provide those individuals who are coming across on the Homes for Ukraine scheme with additional support and resources. What we're really keen to do is to enable the family or individual to come and settle as quickly as possible, signpost and guide people into the services that are available to them. So, for example, registering with a GP, a dentist, or indeed support in accessing benefits and hopefully employment if people are looking to stay. So you can find out more, as you can see, on the websites below. But also tonight, I just wanted to touch on the Ukraine Family Scheme. So again, many of you might be aware of this scheme, but it is different to the Homes for Ukraine scheme. And the ethos behind the family scheme was very much, when it first came out, was really about families and individuals who had connections in Ukraine being able to ensure that their family member could come back into the UK as quickly as possible. And there's an assumption being made that those family members will be able to support the individuals as they arrive. They will almost replace the role, if you like, of the caseworker. So the local authority doesn't always have sight of the individuals that come into the council from the family scheme. We are very reliant on the public and individuals to tell us of those individuals that might arrive under the family scheme. And we would urge people to do that. The reason we want to do that really is to ensure that we've got the support in the right places. Individuals on the family scheme, just as those on the Homes for Ukraine scheme, can access services. They can access, obviously, registering with a GP, they can access benefits, and they can access education. So it's really important that we work together in order to understand everybody who's coming into Wiltshire, to make sure that we have the services in the right places. And again, you'll be able to see that there is further information on the government website around the Ukraine Family Scheme. It's also to note that just on our Wiltshire Council website, we have a help in crisis link, which anyone can access, but it's just to sort of reiterate for those individuals who are on the family scheme or know of individuals that are on the family scheme, there's further information there in terms of being able to access benefits, etc. Thank you. So can I just move on to the next slide, please? So obviously what we'll do is be mindful that questions will keep coming in, and we will have an opportunity at the end to answer as many questions as we possibly can. But again, just wanted to touch on some of the support that we are already offering, and it's important to recognise that this really is coming at it from the Homes for Ukraine scheme, which is the main scheme that we've been asked by central government to support. So what we've done is, I'm sure many of you will be aware that visas are issued separately by government, and as I highlighted earlier, they will undertake those initial checks to ensure that the flow of visas takes place in a timely way. We obviously, as I mentioned, undertake the checks on accommodation and ensure that there's this level of safeguarding that's undertaken too. We make the payments that I've already alluded to, and indeed the practical support that the caseworkers within my team will be able to provide individuals on the Homes for Ukraine scheme. Thanks, Dominic. So education. You'll be aware, I'm sure, for those individuals that have already accessed the Homes for Ukraine scheme and indeed the family scheme, that all children and young people arriving from Ukraine can access education and childcare whilst in the UK. I think that's a really important point for many people as they arrive in the United Kingdom and indeed in Wiltshire. We obviously have a very strong ethos in Wiltshire around education and indeed ensuring that children can access the early years settings that are available to them. So school placements for individuals, families can apply through the council website and in the normal way, and we've seen a number of families being able to do that in the last few months, and that's been very successful, and indeed the process is working extremely well. What we would say as well is that children under the age of 2 can attend nursery, a preschool, or indeed access a childminder in their area, depending on some of the available spaces. Parents pay for the child to attend that. Some children aged 2 may qualify for an early years entitlement, which means there'll be no cost to the parent. This is for 15 hours per week for 38 weeks per year. For children aged 3 and 4, early years entitlement means there will be no cost to the parent, and indeed 15 hours per week for 38 weeks per year. For those parents who start working and pay taxes in the UK, their 3 and 4-year-olds are entitled to up to 30 hours per week, which is double the entitlement we just touched on there. This all sounds quite complex and indeed can be quite confusing for individuals, but our caseworkers are available to help and signpost people to the right place and indeed provide the right up-to-date information going forward. And indeed, there is further information on the links provided. I hope you find it interesting. So again, please do access these links. We will make sure that they are available through the chat and online indeed, and we'll update the website accordingly as well. So also what we've recognised is education for adults, which is really important. And the first thing to say is that we know that English as a second language for people coming from Ukraine is going to be a challenge for many individuals. It is not necessarily going to be their second language, but for some it can be. So our sort of ethos within the council is to try and speak to those individuals who have got strong English skills and link in with them and try to understand the Ukrainian culture better, and indeed wherever possible link into those services whereby English could be taught to individuals on a community and informal basis. However, we recognise that might take some time, and indeed it's about building up relationships with those people who've already arrived. So what we have got is online and face-to-face English language courses, and they are delivered throughout Wiltshire. We also recognise the size of the county, which I'm sure will come up in some of the questions and answers that flow from this discussion. But we are trying extremely hard to ensure that it's delivered throughout the community. But as I say, these will also be online as well. So again, further information is within our website and indeed on the link below. So as you can see, courses range from 1 to 2 hour sessions, and indeed 10 sessions lasting 2 hours each. So it's a really strong English as an opportunity for people to learn English whilst they're here, and indeed we support and try to signpost people to the best courses that are available to them going forward. Thanks, Dominic. Okay, so I'm sure many of you will have questions around housing and accommodation. But just to reiterate, as I said earlier, the Homes for Ukraine scheme, we do undertake checks, and that really is about ensuring that the property is suitable and safe. And indeed, what we are working towards is trying to obtain those visits and discussions with yourselves as early as possible to avoid any breakdown or any challenges in terms of the accommodation that you've identified as being suitable. The checks are done by the team and they're really approachable, and indeed if there's any issues that we can resolve, we will do that. We will try to find ways through to encourage and support you with your desire to become a sponsor. So for example, if somebody required a fire alarm, we would be able to signpost you to various organisations that would be able to support you with that. So our accommodation checks are done, and indeed so smoke detectors may be something that we look at as well. So please bear with us. We have a small team undertaking the accommodation checks, but they are working at pace to deliver this, and hopefully those of you who have met them will find them very approachable in terms of being able to meet the needs that have been set out by central government. Okay, sorry Dominic, next slide please. And you'll be aware, many of you online, and for those of you that are new to this, I'm sure it comes as no surprise that our community offer is second to none in Wiltshire. We have really, really had some amazing contact from the voluntary and community sector, some of which are very well established community organisations, and others that have just organically grown because they wish to support individuals and families fleeing Ukraine. So we have community hubs that have been set up in Salisbury, Devizes, and in Chippenham and other parts of the county that themselves are providing a level of support and contact for individuals who are sponsors, which is exactly what we want to see. We are happy to have conversations with these community hubs, and indeed we work really closely with Wiltshire Together, who are a charity organisation that bring other organisations together in order to support as many of the voluntary community sector organisations as we possibly can. What we're very conscious of is we want to think local and act personal, which is a bit of a quote from Adult Services. But by that, what we mean is we really recognise that your communities are where individuals and families will be living. So what we want to do is ensure that the support is available, and as I say, is organically growing in your area. We will be able to provide a level of individual caseworker support to individual families, but we also want to enable people to live and enjoy their time in Wiltshire. Donations, as you'll be aware, can be made in various charity and organisations, and indeed some of the community hubs will enable you to drop certain goods off, etc., to them, and they'll be able to distribute them more widely across individuals and families, but also to separate organisations as well. But what we would say is do keep it simple, and indeed please engage with these hubs because they are a real wealth of knowledge and support as well. So just for your information, if you wish to make a donation, the Ukraine Disaster Emergency Committee Crisis Appeal, the information there is on our website. Please contact them and they can signpost and help you see what donations look like and how best you can support. And of course, I touched on Wiltshire Together, which again, you will be able to access and link in with them, and they can offer signposting and support too. Thanks, Dominic. So what does it take to become a sponsor? So I think many of you, I'm sure tonight, are very aware of this information. But again, for those of you who are new to this, you must kind of recognise the guidance that the government has handed down. It can be accessed very easily on their website, which we'll obviously share with you. But essentially, you do need a spare room, or at least a spare room, or a separate self-contained accommodation that is unoccupied, and it must be available for 6 months. You are not expected to cover the costs of food and living, and what we would do as part of the Homes for Ukraine scheme is, of course, support individuals to ensure that they were able to access the benefits so that they could afford the food and living expenses. We also, as I said earlier, will give the individual people from Ukraine £200 as a one-off payment until those benefits can be set up. What we would also say is that individuals can access work whilst they're here too. So our caseworkers are working very closely with Department of Work and Pension and indeed other employers across the county in order to access and see if there's any available employment. So what we're really looking for in terms of the sponsor is to be that coordinator either come to us with queries, etc. And indeed, we will support as best as we possibly can to signpost and encourage people to access the most appropriate support available to them. Thanks, Dom. Okay, so that was a bit of a whistle-stop tour. I hope it was helpful, but I think the main purpose of tonight really was to hear from yourselves, and hopefully we can answer some queries. We've received a high number of inquiries through our refugee resettlement and migration team that we've tried to answer as quickly as possible to individuals. What we are very conscious of is that we know there were some themes coming out that lots of people were asking, which is why we're here tonight, really, to try and answer those questions for you as best as we possibly can. Please understand that we have responded to this in a very timely way. As I said earlier, Wiltshire Council is one of the largest councils in terms of numbers of people that have registered an interest, and we are so grateful and so proud of everybody across Wiltshire who have done that. But we are a very small team, and we are reacting as best as we possibly can, and we are growing. We're out to recruitment internally and externally to ensure that the team is robust and able to respond as quickly as possible. So really, it's kind of over to yourself. And indeed, welcome everybody and look forward to some of the questions. Thank you.
Thanks, Claire. So that was a really informative presentation, Claire. And as you said, we've already had some questions in, and I know the team are answering some of the others. So I'll start with the first question, Claire. So someone has asked, I'm a host and I'm still waiting for my accommodation check. When will that happen? So Richard, would you be able to answer that one for us, please?
Yes, certainly, thanks. Checks that local authorities have been asked to carry out can now take place after your guest has arrived. I know initially we were told by government it had to be carried out before guests arrived, but the Home Office are now undertaking their own checks prior to guests' arrival to try and speed that process up. It was one of the sticking points as this scheme got up and running. So we at Wiltshire will continue to carry out required checks. The team will be in touch with sponsors to arrange them. We'll do that as soon as we can, but it won't delay the issuing of guest visas. Because we've got one of the highest numbers of Ukrainian nationals coming to settle here, it is placing a significant workload on our teams. We are coping, but it's taking a little while to get round to all of them. So we've added to staffing to help respond to that. It may be taking a little longer perhaps than you'd like, but we will get to you as soon as we can.
Thank you. Claire, the next question is for you. Our guest is a nursery teacher, so will she be able to have her role here?
Thanks, Kerry. Yeah, great question, particularly around the fact I was just touching on people hopefully gaining employment whilst they remain here. So what we would need to look at is an overseas criminal record check. And I believe in Ukraine, these are called criminal record certificates, and they can be obtained through the Ukrainian consulate. So we do have some information around that again, I think we can share hopefully tonight or indeed more widely. And really that's about ensuring from the from Wiltshire and indeed the United Kingdom that we follow the normal standard safeguarding checks when working with children. But once that check's been done and indeed all the information is available and suitable reference, etc., then obviously we can support an individual to apply for posts as they become available.
Thanks, Claire. So Richard, there's an issue with Ukrainian students aged 16 to 18 with little or no English language who have been told they cannot go to school until September, when they will need to secure a sixth form place. What support can the council provide for them?
Yes, thank you. And we've certainly been hearing that there are some issues about the sort of difference between Ukraine's education system and England's education system around that age group as well. The process is that they should contact the school in the first instance, and the school should be able to offer them a place. They should be offering to place the child either in year 10 or in year 12 if they're in year 11 at the moment, to try and address that issue and the difference of sort of the curriculum between the different countries. They can then access support from the post-16 participation and skills team with a referral form to be posted on www.workwiltshire.co.uk later this week. This will enable the child to make an informed choice about their next steps and the range of provision available post-16. We're advising schools they may want to develop an initial assessment to check suitability for sixth form in September.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Richard. Claire, my Ukrainian The Ukrainian staying with me is a qualified nurse but does not speak English yet. Are there any language courses available to get her up to an acceptable level to work in her field?
It's the short answer, but thanks, Kerry. Really good question again. So yeah, there is courses available, and Wiltshire College is actually really happy to welcome anyone from Ukraine onto their summer English as a second language course, which I believe starts on Monday the 20th of June and runs to Thursday the 14th of July. There are also employability skill courses that are being run as well, and that applies to people, students of the age of 16 too. So there is courses available for individuals who require development around their English skills. And again, we can try and signpost individuals to those courses as they continue to roll through the year.
Thanks, Claire. Richard, will the council help match refugees with the sponsor and help to secure visas?
No, I'm afraid not. That's absolutely not our role, and government, the Home Office, have been very clear there. The role of the person who's interested in being a sponsor is to look to find that refugee to match with. If you're looking to do that, you can link with the community hubs and a number of charities who are providing matching schemes. The issuing of visas is entirely down to the UK government. So our role starts once we are informed that someone has been matched and that they are coming here, when we start doing checks and then preparing for the work around arrival and supporting them when they're actually inside Wiltshire.
Great, thanks very much, Richard. Claire, what is the situation regarding the Ukrainian people driving in the UK using their Ukrainian driving license? I'm hosting a mum with 4 children and we cannot all fit in the car, but if she was able to drive, she could borrow it to take them places.
Yeah, another great question. So according to the government website, you can use your Ukrainian driving license for the first 12 months that when you arrive into the UK, and then you would need to exchange it for a British license. And again, you can find more information through the government website. I think Move to the UK if you're coming from Ukraine is what it's called. And indeed, we can add that to tonight's information for people so that they can access it easily.
Brilliant, thanks, Claire. And yeah, we'll put the links on the website when we publish the recording, so we'll make sure these are all available. So Richard, our nearest school is too far to walk and the road is dangerous without a pavement. There is no bus transport. Is there any provision given the concerns and the mum not being able to drive?
Yes, thank you. If you're looking at the nearest school, we've recently been made aware some bus operators are looking at working up a scheme to offer free or reduced travel tickets for Ukrainian guests. We'll share details when we've confirmed them. At the moment, I know there's a little bit of uncertainty and a little bit of confusion there, but as soon as we've got clarity, we'll make sure that appears in the sponsor newsletter and on our website. I think looking more broadly, in that we will need to be finding school accommodation for Ukrainians who may be in comparatively rural areas, or we may not be able to look at the nearest local school. There may be a role also from the council in our own role to assist with transport there, but it'll be very circumstance specific, and so we will need to be looking at that, I'm afraid, on a case-by-case basis.
Thanks, Richard. Claire, I've tried sending emails, but I do not get a response. I'd also like to volunteer my support. However, again, I haven't had a response to those emails.
Thanks, Kerry. Yeah, and apologies. We are trying to get through the emails as quickly as possible. I do accept there may be some delay in that. As we mentioned earlier, the team has obviously been hitting the ground running from a point where we weren't aware that this was going to happen. So we've responded as quickly as possible. And as Richard said, we have grown the team in a very short space of time. Our inbox is checked every single day and we do try to respond, but we have had a huge high volume of calls and emails coming through regarding questions in this, so we will try to get to you as quickly as possible. In terms of volunteer support, as we touched on earlier, the council is actually performing the accommodation and safety and welfare checks currently, and we're making these a priority. One of the reasons why we've chosen to do it within the council is indeed because of the DBS checks that those people who are undertaking those checks have to have as as well. Many of our staff already have those in place, so we can mobilise that very quickly. We don't, as a council, currently have a volunteer coordination scheme, but our community hubs, as I mentioned earlier, are really where a lot of this activity is taking place. They are springing up all over Wiltshire, but there is some main ones out there. So, for example, Love Devices and indeed the hub in Salisbury. And as I mentioned earlier, Wiltshire Together are really keen in terms of being able to help us and support us to coordinate a level of support to the voluntary and community sector. And we've also got further information around those hubs through the key information links within Wiltshire Council. So I would urge people to have a look there as well. And we do have our community engagement managers who are really on board with this and have been fantastic in supporting the team in being able to reach out widely to the community and voluntary sector. So there's a two-way dialogue as well. So please do access that website and have a look and see what other opportunities are out there.
Great, thanks very much, Claire. Richard, has Wiltshire Council considered, or is there a need for shared arrangements in some cases? For example, if a relative in Wiltshire can support a family or friend from the Ukraine and offer all-day support and meals, but doesn't have enough bedrooms, do you try to match someone who could offer beds and maybe laundry facilities, but not all-day use of their home?
Yes, thank you. This is definitely getting into the complex area now. We've had a couple of I've certainly seen a couple of emails referring to the potential desire to bring over additional family members inside to a host family under the scheme, and it's not entirely clear with government guidance how that should work. So our assessment would be it needs to be an independent arrangement. If hosts want to jointly support a Ukrainian family, that's fine, but they'd need to identify a main host, which would have to be where the family is sleeping. That's because we, as an authority, are required to make sure that we've passed accommodation and safeguarding checks. If it was a joint support arrangement, the host would need to inform us, because the other sponsor family would then need safeguarding checks as well. However, government is clear that there is only the £350 a month thank you payment, one per sponsor family, and therefore that would have to be divided, if it were going to be divided between the two hosts who were assisting. We're not able to provide more than that because the money is coming directly from government. I think it's probably worth noting that the local authority, we may well have a role to play when it comes to rematching families if we end up with host-sponsor relationships breaking down, but we just don't have that role in the initial matching, and it's very clear that being made very clear to us by government that isn't our role here. So yes, we could try and help, but this would be quite a confused situation.
Great, thank you very much for trying to shed some light there, Richard. Claire, would you be able to remind us of the site to claim the immediate £200 and start the money to the family?
Thanks, Kerry. Yeah, what happens is we need to be notified through the resettlement team that your family have arrived. Unfortunately, we don't get that clarification until from yourselves. So if you could let us know, and then your guests will be given an electronic voucher worth the £200. What we do want to double check though is that we're sending it to the right person. So we do like to make sure that that email address that the guest is giving us is correct. So we would ask for confirmation of that address as well to make sure it is going to the right person. So there is a process to follow, but if you could alert us as soon as your guest arrives, we can ensure that process is started immediately. What we also do as well, because it's a voucher and you're able to access that money through pay points, which are often in the local shops, is we will also provide you with a bit of information as to where those shops are near to you as well. So do get in touch as soon as your guests arrive, and we can make sure that that process all starts as quickly as possible.
Great, thank you. Claire, will Ukraine pupils receive free school meals?
Yes, it's my understanding that Ukraine pupils will be entitled to free school meals.
Thank you. Richard, our community is keen to support Ukrainian guests settling into our area. How can we go about doing this?
I think it probably depends where you are, but the best place to start would be to look and find your nearest community hub. These have started and have sprung up all over Wiltshire. If you look on our Support for Ukraine web pages, you can find out where they're currently based, or if there isn't one, we've got people wanting to form additional community hubs all the time. But also look at the Wiltshire Together website, which is providing that information too. So there's an awful lot out there if you want to help. So yeah, reach out and find some like-minded people.
Thank you. Claire, do we believe we will have enough school places?
Yep, we have sufficient places across our schools, and we'll be working closely with families as they apply for those places. We welcome the Ukrainian children and young people into the schools, and there is no sort of issues or adverse impact on Wiltshire children as they come into the school process.
Thank you. Richard, what happens if the relationship between a host family and their Ukrainian guests breaks down?
I think the first thing we'd urge you to do is email refugees at wiltshire.gov.uk with information on the breakdown and the current situation. We're acutely aware that we're dealing with people who are going to be traumatized, they're fleeing a war zone, and things are not going to be as simple as perhaps we would hope in all cases. So we'd respond. First, we'd look to try and offer advice and support to resolve any issues. If all else fails, we'd make efforts to organise another placement. But our team, as we've said, is extremely busy. It may not be able to happen immediately. It is something that I've been discussing through the Local Government Association and James Jameson, the chair there. I'm talking to him about it on last Friday, about the need to make sure that we have got a bank of people that we can use to try and assist if relationships do break down. Ideally, we'd hope they wouldn't. So if you feel there are urgent needs with a placement breaking down, I'd urge anyone to call our safeguarding number, particularly if there are children involved and there's any concern about safeguarding. 0300 456 0100. There's also advice on child protection at Wiltshire Council, and advice and contact for adult safeguarding at Your Care, Your Support Wiltshire. And again, we'll make sure those details are included.
Thanks, Richard. And Claire, are you able to provide a rematch? Richard did touch on this briefly, but are we able to provide a rematch if one family relationship does break down?
So we're still awaiting some further government guidance on this. In fact, what we're saying at the moment is there's a workshop tomorrow actually around the role of the local authority in rematching. So we probably will have further information to update around that as this comes out. But as you know, we understand there's some further sort of relationships out there that have already developed, and indeed that some of that can take place informally. What we would ask though is that you do inform us of this as soon as possible, so that we can make sure that again the accommodation checks take place, and indeed that the welfare checks take place, so that everything is exactly as it would be in a normal sponsor and host a guest relationship. That's the role of the council, really, is to ensure that the property is sound and that the person arriving is safe. So we wouldn't strictly be doing the rematching at the moment. That could, as I say, change moving forward, but currently we do accept, and I think the government also accepts, that some of these relationships have already evolved, and indeed there's charity organisations locally, nationally, that are doing some of this work anyway. And obviously, as I say, please let us know if that happens, because what we would then need to do is follow that up, and then just bear in mind as the sponsor, the lead sponsor, as Richard talked about earlier, is the individual that receives the £350 and is the person that still remains responsible in terms of some of the requirements that we've touched on earlier. So it's important that if that shifts and changes, that we're able to support and navigate that together.
Thanks, Claire, that's great. So Richard, with all the support for Ukrainians, have we forgotten about Afghan people who have come to Wiltshire?
No, absolutely not. We pledged earlier this year to provide 20 Afghan families with homes in Wiltshire. Our resettlement team is continuing to work to achieve this. I think it's fair to say that there have been complexities trying to match some families with precisely where they would like to be inside the UK. but alongside our partners, we're supporting a number of refugees currently in the Bridging Hotel in Wiltshire. We've got a number of families settled in Wiltshire. We would expect to see more settling into the country in long-term accommodation soon. So that work continues and is ongoing, and I wouldn't want it to be forgotten. It's another really important piece of the support that we've been providing as an authority and as a country.
Thanks, Richard. Claire, what happens if a Ukrainian guest comes to stay in Wiltshire, however, the owner of the property is not based in Wiltshire?
That's a really interesting question, isn't it? So we would work with the other local authority in terms of linking in with the host where the property might be, and we would still need to carry out the relevant safeguarding checks, etc. So if the person was out of Wiltshire but the property was in Wiltshire, we would be connecting with that local authority, and obviously having access to the property would be vital to that. But we do that is happening, so that it shouldn't cause any difficulties. It's just to say that we would provide that level of relationship with a different local authority just to ascertain the checks and make sure everything was safe.
Thank you. Claire, another question for you. I'm not hosting, but I have offered to drive refugees to the doctors, shopping, etc. Do I still need to have a check done?
And regarding a DBS check, I think, yep. Yeah. So the answer to that is yes. So what we are saying as the local authority is that we would follow the normal procedures for people who were doing voluntary work, and it would be normal and expected of individuals who were performing voluntary duties to have a DBS check. Yeah.
Thank you. Richard, a question for you. Is there a tie-up between Swindon and Wiltshire councils?
So formally, no. We're required as local authorities to be putting in the same or putting in our provision in our own areas. However, I've certainly discussed this with the leader of Swindon Council. I'm sure that Claire's professional network have been discussing this across the Southwest. Certainly, the Southwest are trying to work together as far as we can to make sure that the appropriate responses are coming all over the Southwest of the UK. When it comes to voluntary groups, I think there probably there is far more scope for that joint working and a tie-up. If we look at the support that's gone in for the Afghan refugees, that's definitely been not just constrained to Wiltshire, it's been Wiltshire, Swindon, all over. So yes, it's definitely going on the community level. But our formal role as a council is very much to deal with hosts that have come forward and been matched inside our authority area.
Great, thanks very much, Richard. Claire, as someone else has asked regarding qualifications, I've had a doctor and a vet that would like to work here. How can they find out if their qualifications are valid?
Thanks, Kerry. And again, really good question. And it's really interesting, isn't it, that individuals are coming across with such high qualifications. So it is quite likely that those sort of qualifications will need to be converted for obvious reasons. But I believe if you access the UK ENIC, which is linked to the UK National Information Centre, you can find out a little bit more about that. So there is a website and it's enic.org.uk. But again, we can make sure that we put that in on our website, Kerry, when we put all the notes, etc. from tonight.
That's great. Thanks very much, Claire. So I'm just having a look at the chat for some more questions here. Claire, are Ukrainian guests able to get £200 if they arrived on the family scheme?
Unfortunately, no. It would just be the Homes for Ukraine scheme that's the money comes into. What we have recognised is, as a council and indeed across the Southwest region and indeed locally, and Local Government Association has also highlighted this, is the discrepancy between the two schemes. So that has been raised, and we are obviously talking with central government about that. But at the moment, it is only for those individuals that arrive on the Homes for Ukraine scheme.
So just to add in there, we've absolutely made sure that's been raised with ministers. They are well aware of the issues. It was raised with civil servants again in conversations last Friday. So there's nothing more we can do there. We hope government will streamline the schemes, but at the moment it hasn't happened.
Thanks, Richard. That's really helpful. I'm just having a look down. Someone has asked if we'll be able to provide the slides in Ukrainian, and I'm sure, Claire, we can certainly work to try and get those translated for them, can't we?
We would try
Yeah.
very much. Yeah, no problem.
Yeah, we will definitely try and get that sorted for you. Bear with me, apologies. Claire, we've got one here. Apologies to put you on the spot with this one. What happens if the sponsor is a local church? Who would be named?
That's a very good question. The organisation, as far as I'm aware, and I'd have to double check the guidance, there is some information around organisations, but currently you have to have one lead sponsor, as we touched on earlier, and the guidance hasn't come out around what will happen for organisations. So I'm sure, for example, lots of charities, especially national charities, will want to step in as well. But as it stands today, it's still based on the individual or family, if you like, across Wiltshire who are classed as the lead sponsor. So you'd have to, as a church or a voluntary organisation, you'd have to establish who that lead sponsor would be.
Thanks, Claire. Sorry to put you on the spot with that one.
Fine. No problem.
Richard, how and when do we request an accommodation check, or does this happen automatically as a result of our permission to travel application, as we've only just applied for the permission to travel letter?
You don't need to request an accommodation check. We are notified once families are matched. The information comes through to us, and we will then make contact to arrange a suitable ability check as soon as we can. I can't guarantee when it will be, but it will be as soon as we possibly can do it.
Great, thank you very much. Claire, is there a way for people to check that their property has been registered under the scheme?
Not publicly. That's something that we would be able to do in the team. But again, there's a difference between those individuals who've registered and those individuals who have found a guest. So there's two differences there. So there's a system that we have access to called the Foundry system, which logs everybody who's registered an interest. But as you can imagine, that is different because they may not have been able to find somebody across Ukraine because they may not have connections like some other people might have. So that is held within central government, and we have access to that from a Wiltshire perspective. But as you can imagine, that's not public facing for a number of reasons, really. But we might be able to find out if somebody's registered on it. But at the moment, we have, as Richard said at the very beginning, we have over 2,800 people on it. So that is just for Wiltshire. So you know, it's a very large number of people that are registered, which is amazing, and it's something I'm incredibly proud of in terms of working in Wiltshire. It's phenomenal, really, but we wouldn't necessarily go in there and do that piece of work at this time.
Great, thanks very much, Claire. So Richard, should we apply for school places before our guests arrive?
Yeah, normally we'd only accept school applications from the person who's got parental responsibility for a child. That'll be a little difficult if you're currently stuck in Ukraine or on the Polish border or somewhere in Europe. So in this instance, we're very happy to accept application forms submitted by sponsors on their behalf. Once we receive the application, we'll contact you by email if we need any further information. And if you want guidance on how to apply for a school place, you can find it in the information pack. For Ukrainian families living in Wiltshire, again, we'll make sure those links are sent round and included so people can get hold of them.
Great, thank you very much, Richard. So we've got one here, Claire. So what EAL support will be given to Ukrainian pupils?
So we have ethnic minority traveller support services within our schools and indeed within the council. So they would be able to access support through those teams. Does that answer the question, Kerry?
Yes, it does. Thank you. And for anyone who doesn't know, EAL is English as an additional language, just in case anyone didn't know.
But it is really important that support is provided, because we have to be honest, the vast bulk of people coming from Ukraine do not have English as even as a second language. Russian is the second language in Ukraine. This support is absolutely critical.
Absolutely, Richard's completely spot on, and indeed our services really recognise that, and we've had some amazing offers of support in, like you've just touched on, in terms of translating documents, etc. But we do recognise that we don't have, you know, a sort of plethora of people that speak Ukrainian, so you know, within the teams and within the support services, we are really keen to continue to kind of learn the culture, and indeed, you know, that's something that we're very mindful of, and the schools have been fantastic in terms of being able to support us with that.
Brilliant, thank you very much. And we have got some questions still in the chat, but we'll provide answers for these afterwards because I know that we can't answer them all this evening. So what we'll do is I'll pass back to Richard now just for some final closing words. And like I say, we'll make sure that we publish all of these questions afterwards so that you can see them. All right. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Kerry. As we've clearly encountered tonight, there are a lot of questions and an awful lot of information. We're putting it all on our website. Please look for Wiltshire Council Ukraine. There's more information on the gov.uk pages, and we will make sure that we share all the links again in the chat, because there are far too many places to be able to sort of grab them, write them down, and doubtless you'll be coming back and thinking, gosh, what was that link that they were talking about? We'll be sharing a link to the webinar so you can watch again to catch all those links that you missed when we were talking too quickly, or to share with those who couldn't attend. So on behalf of Kerry, Claire, myself, I think a couple of things to say. First, thank you to all of you who've offered to host families. It really is great to see. I'm sure it's not something any of you have done lightly. It's a significant responsibility, and it really is extremely gratifying to see the way that Wiltshire is pulling together on this. Thank you to my council staff for the work that they are putting in, going yet again above and beyond to assist with schemes looking to help people who are fleeing from war in Europe. What an awful thing to have to say. Thank you, everyone. Enjoy the rest of your evening. I hope you found that useful.